In the world we live in, evolution has created a variety of systems in which a large number of living organisms survive in closely knit communities. Man has a clearly defined place in these ecosystems. Modern man, however, has produced a variety of changes in many natural ecosystems, often destroying their integrity and depleting natural resources. The most drastic changes have been observed in wetlands and marshes.
Wetlands are some of the most highly productive ecosystems. These are areas in which water dominates in the ecosystem for several months of the year. We have a variety of wetlands in our country, in our rivers, deltas, marshes and lakes. We also have a variety of wetlands which have been recently constructed by man in our hydroelectric projects and irrigation dams.
This is the ecological story of an irrigation project that has been left more or less to itself. The backwaters of the Ujjani irrigation project are at Bhigwan, a village in Sholapur district of Maharashtra. The dam was built only a few years ago across the Bhima river. The water level in the lake rises during the monsoon every year, flooding the surrounding land. As winter progresses into a scorching summer, the water level drops, exposing a large part of the bed of the lake. These seasonal variations affect both the population of microscopic forms of life and that of the insects, birds and animals that feed on them. These years have seen several ecological changes flowing past Bhigwan. Changes that have affected the lives of people and the wildlife in many ways. In 1985, the newly formed wetland had wide expanses of shallow water surrounded by extensive mud banks. Algae and microscopic forms of life were the first to appear in the water. They were soon followed by aquatic insects, worms and mollusks. These began to attract flocks of birds that waded in the shallows and probed the muddy ooze for food. The waders were the commonest types of birds seen at the wetland until 1985. The Greater Flamingo was the most spectacular of these. The flamingo uses its highly specialized beak and tongue to siphon the minute plants and animals from soft, muddy areas. Paddling together vigorously in large flocks helps to dislodge their rich source of food material. Black-winged stilts were one of the commonest waders that could be seen in large numbers in the shallow water. Wagtails hunted for insects at the edge of the lake. The open water was the winter home of a variety of migrant ducks that were attracted to this newly formed wetland. Pintails and shovelers began to arrive in larger and larger flocks every year. In 1986, a few small patches of grass and reeds appeared along the water's edge. This vegetation provided a new type of habitat for birds such as coots and moorhens, the marshland species. The wetland seemed to throb with life. The lake now provided highly diverse types of habitat conditions. " 1987 saw yet another change.
A fishing cooperative has been set up in this area, and a large number of fingerlings are released here every year. With the increase in the number of fish in the lake, this has become a very important business for local people. Along with this economic benefit, we have also found that the fish attract a large number of specialized fish-eating birds.
This island is a nesting colony of several water birds. One of these is the river tern. It lays its eggs in small depressions on the island. Eggs hatch in 18 to 20 days. The parents fly all over the lake to collect food for their hungry chicks. The osprey, a fish-eating bird, has become a frequent visitor. Seagulls also thrive on fish. At times, they scavenge on floating debris and even feed on the occasional dead bird. On a nearby tree, storks and herons have built their nesting colony. This remains the center of activity for several months until the young birds are able to feed on their own.
In 1987, we observed a new change in the ecosystem of this lake. The backwaters were suddenly colonized by this species of semi-aquatic grass known as paspalum. This brought an end to the era of the mud bank within this ecosystem and the flamingos and godwits and stilt which once depended upon it. We now had a new species of birds coming in, the coots and moorhens, which are dependent on marshlands.
Our studies thus began to focus on identifying what had led to this drastic change in the short span of just a couple of years. The pH, alkalinity, dissolved oxygen, and other parameters in the water were monitored every month. Seasonal variations in the micro and macroflora were also studied. The bird population and their species diversity were periodically monitored.
Coots 611.
We found that our lake had changed from primarily a mud bank ecosystem in 1985 to a highly diverse habitat with mud banks interposed by patches of grass during 1986-87. This changed rapidly into a marsh overgrown with weeds in 1988. A highly diverse multi-niche ecosystem had become a single niche system capable of supporting only the marsh birds. This has led to a loss of biological diversity that was a special feature of this wetland. This change can be attributed to an acceleration of the process of ecological succession. A well-known ecological change is the annual cycling that occurs in a small pond. In a newly formed pond, several simple unicellular plants, such as algae, begin to multiply. Microscopic animals, such as the amoeba, also appear. These are followed by aquatic plants, insects, mollusks, and fish. With every monsoon, the rain washes more and more silt into the pond. This changes it into a grassland. Eventually, a forest system is established and the pond disappears. Normally, such a successional change in a large lake should take several decades.
So what could have led to this very rapid change at Big One in just a period of 2 or 3 years? The answer lies in a process known as eutrophication. Eutrophication indicates that the amount of nutrients within this water is extremely high.
This has stimulated the growth of algae, the underwater weeds, and the semi-aquatic paspalum grass. The rapidly developing eutrophication could be attributed to the excessive amount of fertilizers used for growing crops at the water's edge. The residual fertilizer is washed into the lake by rains during the monsoon months, stimulating the growth of this thick tangle of vegetation. The mud banks that were the source of food for the specialized waders are now inaccessible to them. The monsoon also washes the tilled topsoil into the lake, reducing the lifespan of the irrigation project itself. Signs of increasing salinity in the soil are now seen in the waterlogged areas. The farmers' yield of bajra and jawar have decreased. The increasing growth of weeds in the water has begun to affect navigation and fishing. A series of detrimental changes for both man and wildlife have set in. Can a comprehensive eco-development plan be envisaged for the maintenance of a productive ecosystem at Bhigwan? The answer is yes. Management should aim at balancing utilization of this wetland for farming and fishing along with the conservation of nature. Most of the surrounding land can be used for agriculture. Farming, however, should be avoided all along the water's edge up to a width of 100 meters. This would reduce the rate of siltation. The life of the irrigation project could thus be appreciably extended. This would also decrease eutrophication and reverse the overgrowth of weeds, which is affecting fishing and navigation. More species of birds would be attracted to the open mud banks. Fishing need not be prevented all over the lake. The fishermen can easily leave the nesting colonies and feeding zones of the birds undisturbed. This would be a small price to pay for a major conservation gain.
Our study has thus given us the baseline data to be able to formulate a comprehensive management plan for this wetland. Similar conflict issues have occurred in various other wetlands in our country, and they all have their own specific problems and their own specific answers. If proper eco-development plans and habitat management for wildlife can be brought together, we can have man and nature coexist in these wetlands.